Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So today we'll take up deconstruction, the historical background of deconstruction, how it originated soon after neo-criticism and structuralism. So deconstruction is a kind of critical approach which is mainly associated with Jacques Derrida in the late 1960s. In 1966, Jacques Derrida had presented a paper. The name of the paper was Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences. So that paper was presented, and structuralism, the inadequacies, the shortcomings, the drawbacks of structuralism were pointed out. So it's a kind of critical approach which Jacques Derrida had initiated in the late 60s, 1960s, and it doesn't emerge in isolation. It is evolved, or deconstruction took its origin as a reaction against neo-criticism and structuralism. Prior to deconstruction, two other literary theories were dominating the fray. One was neo-criticism and the second was structuralism. So, neo-criticism belongs to the Anglo-American critical theory group, and structuralism belongs to the continental thought. Neo-criticism emphasized on close reading of the text. You have already studied. Neo-criticism focused on close reading of the text without paying any attention to the author. Because for neo-criticism, or for the pioneers of neo-criticism, the author is dead once the literary work is created. Similarly, structuralism emphasized on the structure of a text. They said that every text, every literary work has a particular definite structure, but deconstruction differed with them. Deconstruction did not accept the views of the neo-critics and the structuralists. The pioneer of neo-criticism were T.S. Eliot, I.A. Richards, F.R. Leavish, John Crowe Ransom, Cleanth Brooks, W.K. Wimsatt, etc. But the pioneer of structuralism was Ferdinand de Saussure, a linguist of Switzerland. He contended that every literary text has a definite structure. Neo-criticism rejected the intention of the author, which they portrayed as intentional fallacy. And the neo-critics also rejected or disapproved of the affective fallacy, the emotional response of the reader to a particular writing. So, the intention of the author was rejected because author is dead for neo-critics, and the intention of the reader or the response of the reader, which was portrayed as affective fallacy, was also rejected. And neo-critics put emphasis on paradox, ambiguity, irony, satire, tension, images, simile, metaphor, synecdoche, hyperlage, etc. And the goal of neo-criticism was, or the goal of neo-critics was, the organic unity of the text. They contended that there is an organic unity of the text. But Derrida, when made a minute analysis of the text, he inherited the practice and he also analyzed the ambiguity and paradox in the text. He referred to the 7 types of ambiguity talked about by William Emerson and the notion of irony enunciated by Cleanth Brooks. Derrida argued that meaning is variable. Meaning is not static. Meaning is not fixed. Meaning is not absolute. Meaning varies from situation to situation, context to context. So he said, Derrida said, the control of the author is never acceptable. And he discarded, rejected the intention of the author.
Sir, your voice is breaking in between.
Neo-criticism left the text vulnerable to internal contradictions. According to Derrida, there is internal contradiction when you are analyzing a text on the basis of the intention of the author, on the basis of analysis of the paradox, on the basis of the images used by the author. So there is contradiction. Deconstruction talked about aporia. Aporia means a kind of contradiction, showing how text undermines themselves. And Derrida says, the author, while intending to construct a text, he deconstructs it without his knowledge. Derrida says, author is responsible for deconstructing the text. No other external force deconstructs the text, but it is the author who is responsible to deconstruct the text. Then let's analyze what does structuralism say. Ferdinand de Saussure evolved the theory of structuralism, literary theory of structuralism, and he said every text has a signifier and signifier, a lang and a parole, and it is a language as a system of signifier and signifier. They wanted to apply it. Saussure, Lévi-Strauss, Roland Barthes, Todorov, they wanted to apply it to literature, and they believed that in the underlying structure there lies the meaning. Underneath the structure there lies the meaning. In other words, the structure determines the meaning through myth, narrative code, grammar, etc. So, Saussure suggested for the scientific study of the text. He wanted that text should be studied in a scientific manner. Derrida accepts the idea of Saussure that signs are there, signifier is there, but he says signified is not static. For example, when we talk about a chair, chair is an object where someone sits. It has four legs, two hands. But when you are addressing the president as honorable chair, there chair doesn't mean an object. Chair means the chairman. So this is how the signifier varies from place to place, context to context. So Derrida talked about it. Then structuralism relies on binary structures. Structuralism talks about binaries. For example, nature, culture, speech, writing, man, woman, male, female. Derrida shows that such binaries are unstable. Such binaries are hierarchical and they are unstable. Derrida criticized the structuralists' emphasis of speech over writing. Structuralists put emphasis on speech and they considered writing as supplementary. Speech is important for them. So showing writing as the condition of meaning is not its supplement. Derrida doesn't accept it. So Derrida revealed about the instability of structure and he coined a word called diffora to describe about the endless differal meaning. Difference, differa. According to Derrida, differa has two aspects. One is to differ, differ, and the other is to defer, defer. To differ means not to agree, to have a different opinion. And to defer means to postpone. You don't want to find out the meaning now, you may postpone it till further. After you make a thorough study, then you can bring out the meaning. So the deconstruction as a literary theory shifted its focus from the organic unity of neo-criticism to disunity. Neo-critics talked about unity of criticism. Deconstruction or Derrida talked about disunity. And in structuralism also he found fault. He wanted to shift the stability of the structure or the stability of the signifier and talks about the instability of the signifier. The meaning of the signifier varies from place to place. Derrida thus inherits the method and overturns the goal. Deconstruction tries to find out indeterminacy, undecidability, multiplicity of meaning in the text. According to him, you cannot say if there is one meaning of the text. There are several meanings of a particular text. Deconstruction arose only as a reaction against the principles of neo-criticism and structuralism. Deconstruction always keeps its mind open, keeps its option open to find out new era of meaning, new area of meaning. And he is always open to accept new thoughts, new interpretations, new meanings of a particular text. Some of the critics of deconstruction, they used to say Deconstruction leads to nihilism. But others also argue that it reveals the politics embedded in language itself. So, the basic root or the historical background of deconstruction lies in the tension between the close reading enunciated by neocriticism and linguistic science or linguistic discipline imposed by structuralism. Now, let's discuss the origins of deconstruction. It started, as I told you, as a philosophical movement, and a person who has evolved this theory is neither a writer nor a critic. He has nothing to do with literature. His name is Jacques Derrida of France. He wrote a book in 1967 which is known as Of Grammatology, which was subsequently translated into English by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. So the structuralism and neocriticism, they were challenged by Jacques Derrida. Structuralism talked about a structure, stability of meaning, whereas Derrida says the meaning is not fully fixed. Meaning is variable, meaning is changeable. As I told you, Derrida had written a paper, presented a paper at a seminar held in Johns Hopkins University, in which he presented a paper named Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences. And the ironical part is, there were 13 participants in the seminar, and Jacques Derrida was the 13th person. When he stood up to read out his paper, people were feeling tired. But suddenly, after hearing his paper, the content of his paper, they became very conscious. And they wanted to sincerely attend to the paper. Because the paper was path breaking, paper was revolutionary, which was talking something unique, something new, which so far no one has talked about. So Derrida showed that texts undermine the stable meaning. No text can ever boast of having a stable meaning, because every text is subject to multiplicity of interpretation. You can find out various meanings out of one text. You can't say that this is the meaning of the text. No. Text always varies according to the situation, according to the context. He introduced concepts like, as I told you, diphora, which explains how the meaning is always deferred or postponed. It is never fully present, but it is dependent on many signifiers. So, every text embodies contradictions, and these contradictions deconstruct the unity of the text. The author, in an attempt to construct the text, he has deconstructed it without his knowledge. And the contradictions in the text are responsible for bringing about the deconstruction. Now, Jacques Derrida was influenced by so many philosophers, such as Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger began to question the Western metaphysics. He was also influenced by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche critiqued the truth as a stable concept. He criticized truth as a stable concept. Then Sigmund Freud, the Austrian philosopher, psychoanalyst, he was influenced by the unconscious, disrupting the rational structure. According to Freud, the unconscious is responsible for the disruption of the rational structure. Then Ferdinand de Saussure, the arbitrariness of the science and meaning through difference. So these are the four, philosophers who helped him to draw his inspiration for writing the critical theory or evolving the critical theory deconstruction. By the 1970s up to 80s, deconstruction was given utmost importance in the domain of literary criticism. And critics like Paul D. Mann, J. Hillis Miller, and the Yale School of Critics, they attached a lot of importance to deconstruction because it criticized, it challenged the belief of new criticism in the textual unity, and deconstruction envisaged that in the text there is no unity at all. The text, instead of becoming centrifugal, it is becoming centripetal. Ideas are running away in various directions instead of coming to the center. It showed that coherence in the text is lacking and it is littered with contradictions. So, deconstruction was viewed as a major domain of literary theory, and everyone began to accept it, analyze it, and systematically receive it. Then we will discuss what does deconstruction presuppose? What does deconstruction as a literary theory envisage? We know Jacques Derrida is the pioneer of deconstruction, and whatever theory he has enunciated, it has far-reaching implications. It not only relates to literary criticism, it also relates to philosophy, cultural studies, law, politics, and to some extent, science. Deconstruction threw a challenge at the very idea that the words contain fixed meanings. This is very, very important. Derrida believed that words do not have fixed meanings. Signifiers do not have static signifiers. Signifiers are subject to change. Meaning is always deferred and it is dependent on a chain of signifiers. It is dependent on an endless chain of signifiers. As a result, everyone appreciated Derrida when he talked about the variability of meaning, the dynamic nature of meaning, the changing nature of meaning, the unstable nature of meaning, because a word doesn't have a fixed meaning. No text, Derrida said, has a fixed meaning. This is the core philosophy of deconstruction. The core philosophy of deconstruction is that you can never say that this is the meaning of the text. There are different meanings at different times of a particular text. In other words, a text is subject to multiple interpretations. So many interpretations can emerge out of a particular text. You can't limit yourself to a particular layer of interpretation because it is wrong according to Derrida. Derrida believed that no text has a single, final, authoritative interpretation. On the contrary, every interpretation made by any reader, any critic, is also acceptable. Such type of opinion destabilizes the traditional notion of authorial intent and correct meaning. So the authorial intent talked about by the new critics, it was destabilized. Correct meaning cannot emerge because so many persons can find out several meanings. Deconstruction also exposes how thought system relies on binary oppositions. It is a question of thought. When you talk about speech, new critics gave preference to speech, but Derrida said that speech is not very important. Writing is important. So they talked about binaries like speech, writing, presence, absence, male, female, region, emotion. So he said that the binaries are not always acceptable and they are not always static. These binaries privilege one term over another, but deconstruction reveals that superior term depends on the inferior one. This undermines the rigid power structure embedded in language and culture. For example, Derrida has said a very powerful thing, very important thing. He said, you can't say speech is superior, writing is inferior. Light is superior, darkness is inferior. But tell me, had there been no darkness, could you tell or could you recognize that this is light? No. Had there been no bad thing, could you recognize a good thing? You could recognize it is good because it is not bad. So before knowing about the good, you must know about the bad. So good is dependent on bad. So Derrida argues that every superior element is in some way or the other dependent on the inferior element. For example, darkness, light, good, bad, nature, culture, male, female, speech, writing. So Derrida says there is nothing outside the text. Everything is inside the text. Every cultural product, such as literature, philosophy, law, religion, is textual and therefore subject to interpretation, evaluation, assessment, ambiguity, contradiction, etc. Now, deconstruction had a great impact, very palpable impact, significant impact on literary criticism because deconstruction moved away from neo-criticism's idea of organic unity and it talked about the disunity, disharmony. Instead of seeking coherence, critics looked for aporia. They looked for contradictions. They looked for gap. They looked for difference. And literary criticism became less capable of finding a stable meaning. And it began to question how meaning is constructed. So deconstruction is not just a linguistic play. It questions how the systems of thought justify exclusion, marginalization, sidelining. So deconstruction is a major force in the domain of literary theory. It's a very significant literary theory and it is influential in feminist criticism, post-colonial theory, queer theory, critical race studies, and so on. Cultural studies. Deconstruction dismantled the system of binaries. As I told you, male, female, speech, writing, white, black, light, darkness, nature, culture, colonizer, colonized, etc. So it wanted to dismantle the system of opposing binaries. We find in the Western philosophy there is the privilege of presence. Deconstruction says, or deconstruction envisages that presence is always haunted by absence. That in a text, we talk about truth, essence, presence, or presence of truth. But Derrida says, instead of truth, we should look for untruth. Instead of presence, we should look for absence. Because in the text, there are all kinds of contradictions. In the field of legal studies also, reconstruction shows how legal language is not free from contradictions. In legal language also, there is contradiction according to Derrida. and it cannot be viewed as consistent. He also criticizes the legal language. So, as a result, he views law not as a neutral entity. It is a text subject to interpretation. The way the judge interprets the law, the way the advocate interprets the law, it becomes applicable. So there is nothing fixed in legal domain. And legal language is not neutral. The field of law is not above partiality or criticism. So Derrida also talked about the scientific domain. He said, scientific discourse is not free from metaphor, rhetorics, and textual construction. Knowledge systems are not very much objective, but knowledge systems are shaped by cultural and linguistic frameworks. He also talked about the deconstruction of grand narratives. Grand narratives can be deconstructed to reveal exclusions and contradictions. In the grand narrative also, we come across contradictions. We come across differences. And the postmodern criticism contains contradictions as well. So we find the central implication of deconstruction is that meaning, identity, truth, interpretation are never final, nor fixed, nor authoritative. They are always unstable, relative, and always open to reinterpretation, re-evaluation. As a result, diverse critical movements emerged soon after the evolution of deconstruction. It provoked the critics to say that deconstruction may lead to relativism or nihilism, but you cannot say that it is not impactful. It was very much impactful, and it created a kind of landmark in the domain of literary criticism. Now let's discuss how poetry can be deconstructed. How do we deconstruct a particular piece of poetry? Deconstruction is associated, as you know, to show or associated with the idea to show how meaning is unstable. The very essential thing you should remember, what does deconstruction say? Deconstruction says that any text doesn't have a single meaning. Remember, note it down. A text doesn't have a single meaning. It has multiple meanings in multiple contexts. So, meaning is not final, meaning is not fixed, meaning is not authoritative, rather, meaning is subject to reinterpretation, change, re-evaluation. Any text is subject to reassessment, re-evaluation, reinterpretation. And when a text is reinterpreted, you cannot say that the interpretation is wrong. No. No interpretation according to Derrida is wrong. Rather, each interpretation is correct. So, deconstruction says that it is not concerned with destroying a text, but it is concerned with the meaning of the text, and it is concerned with the justification of the fact that meaning of a text is unstable, meaning of a text is variable, meaning of a text is subject to multiple interpretation. And it also shows how language contradicts itself and how a text can be read in multiple ways. So, first of all, while deconstructing the poetry, let's take up the system introduced by neo-critics, close reading of the text. So before deconstructing poetry, let us read a poem, give a close reading of the poem. And while giving the close reading to a poem, let us notice what are the ambiguities, what are the paradoxes, what are the word plays, what are the contradictions. Then let us find out the binaries. For example, the opposing things such as nature, culture, male, female, darkness, light, life, death, etc. Then let us fix up the contradictions. The poem may be trying to talk about one thing, but undermining itself elsewhere. Let's find out how the meaning doesn't become fixed, the meaning doesn't become stable, rather it is variable, it is subject to change. Let's take the poem of William Blake. The name of the poem is The Tiger. I believe all of you have read the Tiger poem of William Blake. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. In this poem, he has portrayed two animals. The poet has portrayed or talked about two animals. One is the lamb, the other is the tiger. Now let's find out the symbolism behind it. What does a lamb symbolize? A lamb symbolizes obviously innocence. Then what does a tiger symbolize? A tiger symbolizes ferocity. A tiger symbolizes experience, maturity. And the poet says, little lamb, who made thee? The poet is asking, oh little lamb, who has made thee? Who created you? You are such a wonderful creature. You are so very guileless, so very innocent, so very well-meaning, and so very cool. So such type of questioning definitely assumes that the lamb as a creature is innocent, simple, and at the same time it reveals that the poet is showing his ignorance of the creation. At the same time, there is another line, tiger, tiger, burning bright. What does it reveal? What does this line indicate? This line indicates that a tiger is definitely a very aggressive creature, ferocious creature. He is no doubt admiring the tiger, but at the same time, the writer or the poet is afraid of its aggressiveness, its ferocity, its brightness out of burning. So he says, the poet says, God is no doubt the creator, but he has created two contradictory creatures. One is a gentle, sober, suave, simple, innocent, modest creature, that is a lamb, and the other is a fierce, ferocious, aggressive, strong creature like tiger. So God as creator is contradictory. He is gentle enough to make a lamb, but at the same time he is fierce enough to create a tiger. So the binary opposition, innocence and experience, collapses. And the poet is not able to bring about a resolution. Is not able to bring about a resolution or solution. Is not about to not able to solve or resolve the dilemma between two binaries, such as ferocity and simplicity. Simplicity is represented by the lamb, ferocity is represented by the tiger. We may take another poem, which is a brilliant poem, very popular poem of William Wordsworth, which everyone has read, Daffodils. In the poem Daffodils, nature is never celebrated. The beauty of nature is never talked about. So, what is being talked about? the poem is depending on absence and memory. And he is referring to memory when the daffodils are not seen. Daffodils are gone. And the poet says, the flowers are gone, only recollected in tranquility. So presence is undermined by absence. If you go through the lines of daffodils, first of all, he talks about the beauty of the daffodils, how they are dancing in the breeze, and after some time he talks about if the daffodils are not available, they are not seen, they are only found in my memory. I am deriving pleasure by thinking about those past moments when I was in the company of daffodils. So there you find presence is not available, only he is talking about the absence of the daffodils. So this is how you find that poetry can be deconstructed. Any poem can be deconstructed by using the method of deconstruction. You will never find there is a fixed interpretation of a particular line or a particular poem or a particular text, but it is subject to various ways of interpretation. So similarly, Daffodil's poem, instead of celebrating the beauties of nature, it talks about the memory, that the memory of the beautiful daffodils is haunting me very much. And I am in love with the daffodils. Now let's take up how a drama can be deconstructed. I have already discussed with you Hamlet, how meaning varies in Hamlet. People used to interpret Hamlet in different ways, and people used to view the delay made by Hamlet to take revenge against his father's murderer. What could be the reason? It has been explained that there could be multiple reasons as to why Hamlet was making delay to take revenge against the murderer of his father, who is accused of triple murders, triple crimes. Crime number one, murder. Crime number two, incest. Crime number three, usurpation. So, deconstruction of the drama involves how the fixed characters are undermined. You will notice contradictions in the speech of the character. In the drama, especially in the Shakespearean drama, you find there is a severe contradiction, noticeable contradiction between speech and action. The meaning in the dialogue is unstable. You can never find a stable meaning of a particular dialogue. So the meaning is unstable. Language slips and contains contradictions. It challenges the binaries on the stage, such as comedy, tragedy, illusion, reality, actor, character. It also highlights how drama is an unstable play of science, not a stable narrative. According to Derrida, drama is an unstable play of science. For example, we will take up again Hamlet. Hamlet hesitates for what? Hesitates to take revenge. Why does he contemplate revenge? He contemplated revenge because the ghost of his father informed him that whatever is bandied about, I have been stung by a venomous serpent is a brazen lie. The fact is that I have been murdered by your uncle, my own brother Claudius. It was a cold blooded murder. I was enjoying my siesta after lunch in the orchard. At that time, your uncle, my younger brother Claudius, brought some poisonous potion and poured it into my ears. As a result, my whole body developed very severe skin eruptions like leprosy, and I gave in to death. I succumbed to death. It could not be cured. So, after hearing about this, Hamlet had some debate. First of all, is the most biblical dialogue to be or not to be, that is the question. So, this to be or not to be expression does not resolve anything. Tension, it causes uncertainty, it causes vacillating nature, it causes wavering to do or not to do, and it causes hesitation in the mind of Hamlet whether he should take revenge at this point of time or not. So, to be or not to be, instead of resolving the problem, resolving the dilemma, it makes Hamlet oscillate between two poles: existence, non existence, action, inaction, to do or not to do. Then it also creates an atmosphere of delay. When the atmosphere of delay is caused, at that time, what happens? Action collapses. No action is possible. When no action is possible, obviously, the delay continues. Delay continues and no action is possible. As a result, stagnancy prevails, stasis prevails, identity becomes unstable because Hamlet has different parameters to judge. Hamlet has different identities. For example, first of all, he is the Prince of Denmark. Secondly, he has taken up the role of an avenger of his father's murder. And thirdly, he is a philosopher. He is not an ordinary prince. He is a thinking character, intellectual character, sagacious character, judicious character. He cannot be as impulsive as Othello. Othello heard of his wife's infidelity, disloyalty from the villain Iago, and he immediately went to the bedroom of Desdemona and strangulated her to death. But Hamlet cannot do like this. There is a difference between Hamlet and Othello. Othello is impulsive, Hamlet is intellectual. Othello is not judicious, Hamlet is very much judicious. Hamlet always applies his maturity, his wisdom, his power of judgment before taking any step. And that is the reason why he made inordinate delay, big delay, to take revenge against the murder of his father, for which 7 deaths occurred. Hamlet is also found as a madman. He feigned madness, pretended madness. He thought, unless I pretend madness, I cannot know the truth whether my uncle is responsible for the murder of my father. So, as a madman, so how many roles he has taken up? He has taken up the role of a prince. He has taken up the role of an avenger. He has taken up the role of a philosopher. He has taken up the role of a madman. He has also taken up the role of a lover. He is a lover to Ophelia. Now the play questions its own genre. What is its genre? Is it an existential play? Is it a parody of action? Or is it a revenge tragedy? You will always find that the play Hamlet, the legendary Shakespearean play Hamlet, the most remarkable Shakespearean play Hamlet, looks for its identity. Identity about its genre. What is its genre? Whether it is an existential play, whether it is a parody, whether it is a revenge tragedy. Then let's take up another play, an absurd play, written by Samuel Beckett. The name of the play is Waiting for Godot. All of you must be knowing about it. If you make a traditional reading of this play, you find that the play is about waiting, the play is about futility, the play is about hopelessness as well as hope. They are waiting with a hope. At the same time, in the process of waiting, they have been talking about the futility of life, the meaninglessness of life. There are two characters. One is Estragon, the other is Vladimir. Vladimir is very tenacious. His purpose is very clear cut. But Estragon is volatile. Estragon always says, okay, let's go. Vladimir says, we can't. Estragon says, why can't we go? Vladimir says, because we are waiting for Godot. Godot. So what does this Godot mean? Godot may symbolize God. Godot may symbolize salvation. Godot may symbolize accomplishment. Godot may symbolize any boon, any bonanza, any fruition, any fulfillment, any victory for these two persons. There are also another pair. There is also another pair, Pojo and Loki. Pojo is the sadistic master and Loki is the submissive slave, which talks about the class distinction prevalent in our society. While referring to Marxism, I had told you how there are two classes of people. One is the bourgeois or the richer class. The other is the proletariat or the poorer class. So here in Waiting for Godot, you find There are two categories of people, the master and the slave. Who is the master? The master is the rich man. Who is the slave? Slave is the poor man who is depending on the mercy of the master. If you try to analyze the play Waiting for Godot, the absurd play Waiting for Godot, you find this is an existential play. The play relates to existential philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre says the existence precedes essence. First of all, we must exist, then only we can talk about our utility. We can talk about our essence. We can show our essence only when we are in a position to exist, to survive. How do we survive? We may survive when food is given to us, cloth is given to us, shelter is given to us. So, food, cloth, and shelter are the three things. So, there you find existential issues. There is some network problem. Yeah, there is some network problem. Anyway, so the existential issues are to be noticed in this play. When Vladimir and Estragon, both of them are talking about their position, they are also aware that life is meaningless, life is futile, and there is no guarantee of a bright future, for which they are suffering from a sense of frustration, a sense of disillusionment, a sense of disappointment. And both of them, they have been talking about so many issues. Along with that, they have been trying to wait for the arrival of Godot. In the meanwhile, a boy comes and reports that Godot cannot come today, he will come tomorrow. At that time, Estragon says to Vladimir, "Okay, let's go then. If Godot doesn't come, what is the necessity of waiting here?" But Vladimir says, "We can't go." Estragon says, "Why? Why can't we go?" Then Vladimir says, "We are waiting for Godot." Then he says, "Godot is not coming." He says, "He will come tomorrow." Vladimir further says, "If he doesn't come tomorrow, we'll wait till day after tomorrow." Means Vladimir has never left the hope that Godot will not come. Vladimir believed that Godot will definitely come. If he doesn't come today, he will come tomorrow. If he doesn't come tomorrow, he will come day after tomorrow. And we are destined to wait for him. We can't afford to ignore him. We can't afford to go away. Rather, our job is to wait for his arrival. So, what do you find? The dialogues in the Waiting for Godot, the absurd play, They are always repeated. Same type of dialogue. Let's go. We can't. Why can't we? We are waiting for Godot. So this thing is repeated almost quite often. Dialogue repeats endlessly, and the signs point to nothing definite. Nothing definite is emerging. Whether Godot is coming or not coming, no one is sure. Godot is absent. There is no character called Godot. But Godot is only used in language. The character of Godot is never seen. But ironically, the plot of the whole play revolves around the character of Godot. So here we find, according to Derrida, the presence of Godot is defined by his absence. Look at the analysis. Derrida says the presence of Godot is felt or defined by the absence of Godot. Godot is not actually present, but everyone is talking about Godot. So the presence of Godot is indicated through his absence. The binaries, like hope and despair, they also collapse. Waiting is both hopeful and hopeless. Sometimes it is hopeful and sometimes it is hopeless. They are hopefully waiting for Godot to come. They know that Godot will come. That's why they are waiting. And sometimes they are feeling desperate. That Godot may not come. So at every point, you find that there is no certainty. So Derrida is talking about that. Okay, the binaries here are, one is hope and the other is despair. So the distinction between hope and despair has collapsed because waiting here is interpreted not only as a sign of hope or hopefulness, rather at the same time it is also indicated as a sign of hopelessness. So Derrida has rightly said, he has rightly suggested that deconstruction doesn't give you a final meaning. Deconstruction always keeps an option open to interpretation in various ways. One particular text can be interpreted in various ways. You can't say this is the only interpretation of waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot can equally be interpreted in different ways. Hamlet as a play can be interpreted in different ways. You can't say this is the only interpretation of the text. So deconstruction doesn't give a final meaning. In other words, deconstruction talks about the multiplicity of interpretation, multiplicity of meaning, multiplicity of appraisal, multiplicity of evaluation, multiplicity of assessment. So he says, Derrida argues that meaning in poetry and drama is always deferred. It is always deferred. It remains unstable. It remains self-contradictory. So this is how Derrida has been talking about how to deconstruct a piece of poetry or a piece of poem or a piece of drama. If you look at the great and remarkable literary theory which created almost a revolution in the field of literary criticism in the 20th century, especially after the mid 60s, it is considered as a movement. It is a critical theory, no doubt, but this critical theory started like a movement. Its origin, its method, its implication, its philosophy, its cultural theory, everything appeared unique, appeared new, appeared to contain novelty. And it was initiated in the late 1960s through the book of grammatology. Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher who had no connection with literature, who had no connection with literary theory, who had no connection with, you know, literary criticism, he evolved the theory of critical theory of or literary theory of deconstruction. And he triggered it in his book of grammatology. How did he trigger it? He never bothered about anything. But he started bothering when the two literary theorists or two groups of literary theory, such as neo-criticism and structuralism, when they said that text has a fixed meaning. Neo-criticism suggested to make a close reading of the text, to study the ambiguity, paradox, intentional fallacy, affective fallacy, simile, metaphor, image, etc. At that time, Derrida found that there is contradiction in the text. When there is contradiction in the text, how can one make a close reading of the text? By making a close reading of the text, we are supposed to unravel the organic unity of the text. But Derrida said there is no unity in the text. There is disunity, there is disharmony, there is contradiction in the text. He also reacted to the views of Ferdinand de Saussure, the structuralist. He said that logocentric tradition is not acceptable. Logocentrism believed in a stable meaning, a stable meaning. But Derrida said the meaning is never fixed. Meaning is never stable. Meaning is unstable. Meaning is uncertain. Meaning is full of contradiction. Meaning is always deferred. So texts are inherently unstable. They contain contradictions that undermine their apparent unity. How do the texts damage their own unity? How do the texts undermine their own unity? They undermine their own unity when they embody contradictions. And the contradictions are there without the knowledge of the writer. Because Derrida has made it clear that the writer, instead of constructing the text with the intention of constructing the text, he has deconstructed it without his knowledge. Unknowingly, inadvertently, he has deconstructed the text. So, meaning is never fixed in the text. Texts are unstable because they contain contradictions. Each text has multiple meanings. Since meanings are unstable or text is unstable, naturally we can't say that text has a fixed meaning. Now, deconstruction has challenged the authority of the author. Roland Barthes, another post-structuralist critic, he wrote an essay in 1967 known as Death of the Author. What did he suggest there? He suggested that after a literary work is created, the author is dead. In other words, while referring to the text, the name of the author should never crop up. No one should talk about the name of the author. No one should discuss the biography of the author. No one should analyze the career of the author. How did he start his career? How did he grow as a poet or writer? All those things are not essential. What is essential is close reading of the text. And Derrida pointed out there, what kind of close reading is possible when the text itself is defective. He found drawbacks in the text. He said, there is no center of the text. The ideas are not becoming centrifugal. They are not converging at the center of the text. Rather, they are divergent, moving in divergent directions. So they are centripetal. Instead of becoming centrifugal, they are becoming centripetal. So Derrida said, the text is suffering from inherent drawbacks. And those drawbacks are contradictions, lack of fixed meaning, instability, disunity. There is no unity in the text. There is disunity. You can have multiple interpretations of the text. A single meaning of the text cannot be churned out. Then he said, if anyone says this is the meaning of the text, he is a fool. You should never accept his suggestion. He made it and declared it in a very loud and clear voice. Each and every text can be interpreted in multiple ways. As I have given you the example of Hamlet on the issue of delay. Why did Hamlet make delay to take revenge against the murderer of his father. Point number one. First of all, he wanted to get confirmation whether the ghost who met him and informed him about his murder, his father's murder, is the real ghost of his father or an evil spirit. He wanted proof. He wanted to be confirmed. Number two, he could not take revenge because he was just a prince. He did not have the weapons, soldiers under his control. So he simply could not dare attack Claudius, who is the king of Denmark. Number three, Hamlet is loved, liked, worshipped by the people of Denmark as God. Everyone likes him. Everyone respects him. He is as much respectable as his father. So he did not want to soil his reputation, tarnish his reputation. If he launches an attack on Claudius, people of Denmark might feel that Prince Hamlet is a power-hungry man. So he did not want to denigrate his personality and to soil his reputation. Next point. Hamlet was suffering from or was a victim of Oedipus complex. In his unconscious, he had a secret desire to have physical union with his mother, Gertrude, because Gertrude was very good looking. She was a sensual and voluptuous woman, very attractive woman. And according to Freud, every son has a kind of attraction towards his mother. In this connection, he has narrated the Oedipus complex theory. There was a king named King Laius. He had his wife, whose name is Jocasta. The king and queen did not have issue for a long time. They made all kinds of efforts. Puja, Havan, Yajna, spiritual festivals and all that. After which a child was born, a baby boy was born. After the baby boy was born, the astrologer was called for and he was asked to cast his horoscope. But the astrologer predicted that this boy will kill you, marry your wife, and become the king of your kingdom. So the king immediately ordered the security staff to throw the boy into the jungle. So the baby boy was thrown into the jungle. He was received by a few shepherds. The shepherds took the boy to the king Polymos, and he was brought up by Polymos as his own son. He grew up, became a king, and came to conquer the kingdom of Laius. There was a fighting. He killed Laius and married his wife Jocasta, who is otherwise his own mother. But he doesn't know that she is his own mother. So after this, Freud interpreted every son in his unconscious level, at his unconscious level, has a kind of weakness towards his mother. And since Hamlet was having some kind of physical weakness, a sexual weakness towards his mother, which was not fulfilled, he wanted the same to be fulfilled indirectly by his uncle. And even during his childhood, he had wanted to kill his own father because his father is his own rival to get the love of his mother. He did not want to share the love of his mother with anyone. So, as a victim of Oedipus complex, Hamlet wanted that Claudius and Gertrude should have physical relation. So he did not want to kill Claudius. So these are the 5 and 6 reasons why Hamlet was making delay to take revenge against Claudius. So from this you can imagine how a particular text can be interpreted from various standpoints and how a particular text has multiple ways of interpretation. So we cannot say that each text has a fixed meaning. No. No text has a fixed meaning. Derrida dismissed, refuted the point made out by other people like the structuralists and the new critics. Every text has a fixed meaning. He simply refuted it, dismissed it, and said a text doesn't have a fixed meaning. A text doesn't have an organic unity. A text contains contradictions. A text has multiple meanings. And a text is subject to multiple interpretations. In any manner, you can interpret it, but it doesn't have a fixed meaning. When it doesn't have a fixed meaning, you can't say the text has organic unity. There is no unity in the text. It is not centrifugal. It is centripetal. There is no center in the text. The author, instead of constructing the text, has already deconstructed the text. The ideas are self-contradictory. The ideas are not converging at the same point. So, Derrida has talked about the lack of organic unity, the instability of the text, the inner contradictions of the text, and those contradictions are responsible to undermine the unity of the text. So you can find, if you make an objective analysis, an impartial analysis, a dispassionate analysis of the wonderful critical theory, the mind-blowing, path-breaking literary theory deconstruction, you come to notice how Derrida has challenged the authority of the author, like that of Roland Barthes, and instead of putting emphasis on the author, deconstruction shifted its focus to the use of language, to the meaning of language, to the decentralization of language, to the disunity of language, to the contradictions of language, to the free play of words, etc. Then Derrida said, since it is full of contradictions, no fixed meaning can emerge, because the contradictory ideas have undermined the fixity of the meaning or the concept of fixed meaning. It also exposed the hierarchy in language. What hierarchy? The binary oppositions. Speech, writing, nature, culture, male, female, presence, absence. And he said, these hierarchies put something as superior and another as inferior. So Derrida says, even if something is superior, still the superiority cannot be proved unless it is referred to the inferior. For example, you say there is light or this is light. How do you know this is light? Because it is different from dark. Last night you had seen darkness. Now in the morning you are seeing light. So you can judge the usefulness of light by knowing about the meaning of darkness. So if light is superior to dark, the superiority of light is dependent on the inferiority of darkness also. Had darkness not been there, you would not have been able to talk about light. You can distinguish a male from a female because you have seen a female and you see a male. There you notice the distinction. A female is not a male because biologically female is different from male. Structurally, the female is different from male. So, he exposed the hierarchies in language. And he said, these binaries are structured by power, by utilization of power. It influenced other disciplines apart from literature. No doubt, deconstruction influenced literature, but apart from literature, it influenced other disciplines as well. For example, deconstruction is noticed in law, in architecture, in psychoanalysis, in feminism, in post-colonial studies, everywhere. Some of the critics of deconstruction, they used to say that deconstruction leads to undermine the meaning altogether. They say if deconstruction argues in favor of multiplicity of meaning, it may so happen that the meaning will be totally undermined. Meaning will be totally undermined. And the worth of meaning can never be realized. Derrida's style of looking at the literary work is considered as difficult, obscure. Some of the critics of deconstruction, they suggest that Derrida's style of looking at literary pieces of literary works is very complex and very obscure. which is not true. Because whatever Derrida has said, he has proved it. He has made attempts to prove it through examples. And where is he wrong, you tell us. Critics will always be there. Some critics argue that Derrida's critical theory, deconstruction, dismantles the structure, but it fails miserably to rebuild the structure, which is a contrast to Marxism or feminism, which seek change. They say that Derrida dismantles the structure but is unable to build it. But Derrida says, I don't dismantle. Derrida says the deconstructionist critic is not responsible for the dismantling of the text. Who is responsible? The writer himself. At the time of writing, he has dismantled the text without his knowledge. He doesn't know, but it has already been dismantled. Then it is also alleged that Derrida puts more emphasis, rather he overemphasizes textuality, and he ignores the social material realities. This may be one of the points. Actually, Derrida puts overemphasis on the structure of the text, language of the text, meaning of the text, contradiction of the text, how it is dismantled, how it lacks unity, and how there is no organic unity, there is disharmony. All these things are emphasized by Derrida in his theory of deconstruction. However, in the present age, Derrida's ideas about instability of meaning is realized in a strong manner. In other words, Derrida's ideas in deconstruction theory about instability of meaning resonate strongly nowadays. There is an intersection with post-humanism also. What does deconstruction do? Deconstruction questions the centrality of human subject. It opens space for ecological and technological critics. It opens up opportunities for cultural studies, for identity. So deconstruction influenced post-colonialism, critical race studies, and it began to question the binaries. Deconstruction theory questioned the hierarchy system, and at the same time he said, you have no right to fix up the boundaries by calling something as superior, branding something as inferior. One must remember that while attempting to prove the superiority of a particular thing, you have to depend on the inferiority of another thing. He has given an example. How do you know this is light? Because you know this is not dark. When did you see the dark? You saw the darkness last night. After the night is over, you come across bright light of the day, and then you make a comparison. If this is the bright light of the day, yesterday there was darkness of the night. Then you feel if the bright light of the day is superior to darkness of the night. Here lies the dependence. Derrida says you are able to distinguish between light and dark. You are able to realize the superiority of light only when you came to know that darkness is inferior, darkness is bad, darkness I noticed yesterday night, it was something disastrous, discouraging, and very, intimidating, and nothing was visible. So light is always preferable. So you wanted to justify the superiority of light by depending on the inferiority of darkness. Now, deconstruction may dismantle the text, but we must also know it also points out certain realistic drawbacks which were noticed in neo-criticism and structuralism. So, while drawing a conclusion on deconstruction as a literary theory, he will definitely agree that when there was a seminar at Johns Hopkins University in 1966, Jacques Derrida, the philosopher of France, had gone to attend that seminar. In the seminar, scholars were there, literary critics were there, professors were there, writers were there, even some philosophers were there. But no philosopher did present any paper, seminar paper. It was Jacques Derrida who presented the seminar paper. And the paper was a very unique and a different kind of paper, a paper with a difference. And the name of the paper, or the title of the paper was, it had a peculiar title: Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences. I repeat, Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences. you will be finding it very interesting to note that there was about to be lunch break. The session was almost coming to an end. As many as 13 presenters were there, and the number 13 presenter was Jacques Derrida. Before Derrida, 12 persons have already presented their paper on literary criticism, on structuralism, on neo-criticism, etc. Derrida was the 13th man. Since lunch break was nearing, people were feeling monotony. Some people were dozing. Some people were feeling exhausted. And when Derrida's name was called out, Derrida went to the dais, addressed everyone, addressed the chair, and he read out the name of the title of the paper. He said, then I am going to present a paper. The title of my paper is Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences. At that time, when the seminar attendees heard about it, they forgot about their monotony. They shook their head and came to attention position because they found that this paper is definitely different from other papers. Other papers were stereotypes. Other papers were run-of-the-mill papers. Other papers were not very interesting. And this is a paper which is certainly going to generate interest. And they began to analyze each word used in the title of the paper. Structure, sign, and play. Structure relates to structuralism. Signifier, signified. Syntagmatic, paradigmatic. Lang, parole. Competence, performance. Hierarchical interpretation of binaries. Then sign, signifier, signified. Then play, play of words. How words in a different context may mean differently, and in another context it may have a different meaning. So the play of words in the discourse of human sciences. Then he started presenting his paper. People listened to him with rapt attention, and that was a landmark. That was the turning point in the sphere of literary criticism, literary theory. A new wave called deconstruction made its entry into the domain of literary theory, and everybody spoke highly of Derrida. And people also expressed their surprise that Derrida, not being a literary critic, not being a writer, not being a professor, not being a reader of literature, could evolve a theory embodying new philosophy, new attitude, new approach, new procedure, new method, and it has dared expose the intentional fallacy, the affective fallacy found in neo-criticism. Intentional fallacy refers to the intention of the author, the authority of the author, the monopoly of the author, and the affective fallacy refers to the emotion of the reader, how the writing affects the emotion of the reader to appreciate or depreciate the text. Derrida also exposed the theoretical context of structuralism, when structuralists like Ferdinand de Saussure, they argue that the meaning of the text is fixed. Structure is important. Signifier and signified are important. Lang and parole are important. At that time, Derrida said, signifier is important. Signified is important, no doubt. But for one signifier, There cannot be one signifier. Sometimes the signifiers keep on changing for signifiers. So the meaning is not fixed. There is multiplicity of meaning, and it is subject to multiplicity of interpretation. You can't say कि this is the fixed meaning. And when they were talking about the organic unity of the text, the neo-critics, the structuralists, they talked about the unity of the text. Derrida talked about the contradictions in the text. He said a text embodies severe contradictions. As a result, those contradictions undermine the unity of the text. And at the same time, he says the author is responsible for it. The author, in his attempt to construct the text, has deconstructed it without his knowledge inadvertently. So the ideas are scattered. Ideas are decentralized. There is no center in the text, and there is free play of words. The ideas, instead of converging on the center, they are diverging or divergent. And the text, instead of becoming centrifugal, is appearing to be centripetal. So there is no center of the text, there are contradictions of the text, there is no unity in the text, and the hierarchies are not to be acceptable, are not to be accepted. The binaries, hierarchical binaries, are rejected by Derrida. So this is how Derrida's deconstruction is considered to be a path-breaking literary theory, critical theory, and it has enriched the domain of literary theory. There is no doubt about it. We'll stop it here. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Tomorrow
Thank you,
we'll
sir.
have a class. Tomorrow we'll have a class at 4 o'clock, okay? And we'll have the last block, the 8th block. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.